Good evening, Moirai V'Raboisai. I see some people standing in the back. There are plenty of seats. In the women's section, there are seats there. In the men's section, there are seats there. Please come in and make yourselves comfortable. Bruchim Aboim B'Shem Hashem. Tonight's Farbrengen of Kahal Adas Achsidim of the Chabad community of Southern California is to help us prepare for Yom HaGodel VaHaKodesh, the day of Yud Shevat that's coming up in 10 days from now. That will be the beginning of Shirim Shana of the 70th year of the Rebbe's Nesius. I want to begin by thanking all the people, I will not mention them by name, but all the people who were involved in coordinating tonight's gathering and tonight's Farbrengen and bringing down Rabbi Jacobson and making this event, this incredible event possible in a very short span of time. It's not always no kach, but if I can ask you to please give a round of applause to people who worked very hard to make tonight's Farbrengen happen. Begin with the Kapitel Tehillim. Please rise. We'll ask Rabbi Shusterman, on behalf of the Rabboni Chabad who called for this special Kinnis Yisraelis, to lead us in Kapitel Kuf Yud Ches.
Hey, Galani Aikite, Kilielam Chazdei. Yemen, no Yisrael, Kilielam Chazdei. Yemen, no Beisarin, Kilielam Chazdei. Yemen, no Yere Adinoi, Kilielam Chazdei. Min Ameit, Korosiyo, Anoni, Vamer Fabio. Adinoi, Lilairo, Mayasli Odom. Adinoi li b'Yisroi, v'aniere b'Seinoi. Tevlach says Badinoi, Mimtel b'Odom. Tevlach says Badinoi, Mimtel b'Nedivim. Kol goyim s'v'muni b'Shem Adinoi kiyam milam. Saboni gam s'v'muni b'Shem Adinoi kiyam milam. Saboni chidverem docho keshkeisim b'Shem Adinoi kiyam milam. Docho d'chsani limpel Badinoi azuroni, o t'vizim esyo, ayim l'shuo. Kol Navi Shua Li Tzadikim, Yemin Adonai Yisochayil, Yemin Adonai Meimo, Yemin Adonai Yisochayil. V'Yamos Kiach Yavasa B'Maiseyo, Yaseh Yisraniyo, V'Lamav Etzlein Esanoni. B'Eshkuli Shani Tzedeko V'Vermediyo, Yashar Ladinoi Tzadikim Yaveyu V'Ei Chokim Yisanu Yatil Lishua. Even Loas Vabein, Michael and Eshbino, Beis Adinoi Zeis in the cloth Benenu. Zayim Asadinoi, Nagila Benismochavei, Anadinoi Shiana, Anadinoi Aslichana, Barhaba B'Shem Adinoi, Berachnu Chami Beis Adinoi, El Adinoi Vayarlanu, Yitzchak Baveis Makanis Amizbeach, Eliyato Yeida Kola Hayarim Mecca, Haidalani Ekitei.
Please be seated. There is tremendous hisoirus, tremendous excitement among Anash all over the world in honor of this upcoming Yud Shevat. There is an organized group of Bochrim and Yungalite who are trying to collect and put together all of the hachlotas tovas, all of the good decisions, and all of the projects and all of the undertakings that will be undertaken by Chassidim in honor of this Yud Shevat. In order to present this, Akoponim Bekitzer, we're going to ask Harav, Ruvain, Hakoy, and Wolf to come up and please explain this mivtza, and then we'll ask the speaker of the evening.
Mendel Futterfass once explained the idea of Mivtzayim, of the Rebbe's mitzvah campaigns. He said that he remembers from the days that he was back in the Soviet labor camps, he met he met a fellow prisoner. He was in a conversation. And this prisoner was once an officer in the navy of the Tsar. And he told him how it was. He was a diver. And when they had to lift up a sunken ship, they would use these big chains. And they had big hooks. And here his responsibility was to go down and hook the hook up to the ship and then lift it up. But that would only work if the ship was just recently sank. If you're dealing with a shipwreck that was beneath the water for a very long time, if you try to pull it up with the hooks, then the ship, because it was brittle already, it would break. So they came up with a phenomenal invention. They had a mat, an inflatable mat. They would send or let the inflatable mat down to cover the ship. And through the mat, there were hundreds of small little hooks, chains with hooks. And then they had many divers go down, and then they would hook as many places as they can. They would hook to this ship. Then they inflated the mat, and it would rise, and in one shot, the ship would come up. So Mendel all his years said he didn't know. Every time he learned something in Avodas Hashem, something is meaningful, but he couldn't figure out why does he learn from this. And then when the Rebbe started the mitzvah, his mitzvah, the mitzvah campaigns, he understood. The Jewish people in exile are like a ship that's on a voyage across the world in which we weathered storm after storm. But then, towards the end of this dark and difficult exile, the ship sank. In the sense that millions of Jews lost their connection to Jewish oxygen, to the oxygen of Kihem Chayenu V'Yorech Yameinu. So here you have the Rebbe wanting to bring up the ship, to send down one or two hooks to pull it up. We might be too brittle. So the Rebbe then took all of his chassidim, thousands of men and women, boys and girls, and each one of them is has a little chain with a hook. And we begin hooking Jews, one with tefillin, one with the mezuzah, one with a letter of a Sefer Torah. And it's hard to find a Jew that does not have what we call a Rebbe hook. And then it's the Rebbe who has the power to inflate and to cause the ship to rise. In 1990 and 1991, the Rebbe told us that the ship and whatever we needed to do to prepare us to complete this job of preparing Knesset Yisrael, the Jewish people, for the Geula, is completed already. The ship is up. But suddenly, right at that moment, it became dark, extremely dark and confusing. And by the time we got used to the darkness, the captain was nowhere to be seen. And we were bewildered and confused, but then we looked back at the words the captain said to us on the day that he joined that ship. And then he told us, we just heard it right now, what his mission is. Basi legami achoisi kala, which means to bring the Shekhinah down to this world, and that job is not completed just with many Chabad houses. It will only be completed when the third Beis HaMikdash is standing, and the Nigla Kvod Hashem and the glory of God is seen in the entire world. That means that our Rebbe's job is not over. Confusion, darkness, yes, but his job is not over. So what can we Chassidim do coming to 70 years, and we get a Geval 26 years, almost 26 years since Gimel Tammuz, V'adayim lo neshanu, this bitter gullus can't not letting go. We have no choice. And as the Rebbe said in a letter that he wrote a day before he was Mekabel his Nesias, talking about the 9th of Shvat, Tavshin Yud Aleph, the Rebbe writes a letter to Rabbi Avram Paris. And the Rebbe says, Rabbi Avram, wir dürfen zurückbringen den Rebbe. We need to bring the Rebbe back. Von mir ist es ist zu schwer, sei von mir und sei von dir, und wer hat Not davon? It's too difficult. As he said, it's too difficult for me and for you. And who benefits? We will ask any Lubavitcher across the entire world, who's benefiting from this concealment, from this darkness? People predicted we would be completely lost. We did amazing things in the last 26 years, but who is enjoying that we don't see our Rebbe? But how do we do this? How are we going to bring our Rebbe back down here to finally dock the ship? Well, the Rebbe could do it. The Rebbe had muscles, but our Rebbe has. Perhaps it's time for reciprocation. The Rebbe all threw to each and every one of us a lifeline, all these chains. Who can say in this room that there hasn't been a time in his life that he was in the dark, that he was struggling with something difficult and the Rebbe didn't throw him a lifeline? Now our Rebbe needs us. We're all going to throw our chain with the hook. Chassidim across the entire world. Ba'achdus. An incredible idea. The Eibishter dropped into the world this year for Yud Shevat. A unification that technology helps make possible. And that Chassidim across the world should study and learn the entire Torah, the entire teaching of the Rebbe as Achana to Yud Shevat. Ano Nafshi Ksodis Yehovah, the Rebbe is one with his Torah. The Rebbe is one with his Miftzah campaigns, with his Miftzayim. We will take upon ourselves, and Chassidim across the world, in Africa, in Eretz Yisrael, in Canada, everywhere, in the East Coast and the West Coast, are all joining together in this massive campaign. So what are we going to do? We're going to act right now. Right now. Because if you're going to push it off, who doesn't want to have a chelik? This incredible. We're going to count to 3, not now, but with this, between now and Yud Shevat, we're counting to 3 and we're all going to yank together. And Be'ezus Hashem, this Yud Shevat, even before that, we'll see already, Melech b'yofyo yitachzena einenu. But what we're going to do right now is in those envelopes, there is a sheet, a paper. And on that paper there is a barcode. You can scan that barcode for those of you that are technologically savvy. And for those of you who still need a little bit of an old-time thing, there's a link there. You can punch the link in. And for those of you who don't know what a link is, you're hopeless. Speak to your mashpia. Or maybe you should become the mashpia. But in any case, well, kidding aside, now is the time to work. When you'll go follow that link, you're going to come to the California page. California page has within it, because each community took certain halakim, so we can manage to get everybody together. So in the California page, you have different communities in California itself. We have the La Brea community, and then you'll have Pico. So for instance, here in La Brea, all shuls are getting together to learn the entire year of Tafshin Nun. In Pico, and Beis Petzalel took upon themselves Tafshin Yud. You will go in there and put your name, and once you take it, it's not available for anybody else. This will create a powerful muscle, and also Miftzayim. Take upon yourself Miftzayim. And in the next 10 days, today is Rosh Chodesh Shvat, let's use this as our Aseres Yemei Tshuva. 10 days of Tshuva. Tshuva not from sin. Tshuva called Chazoras Panim El Panim, to turn back face to face. With a powerful yearning, Ritzoyneinu, Lidois Esmalkeinu, we want to see our King. With this, for sure, we can tell the Eibishter, Borcheinu Avinu, Kulanu Ke'echad. Bless us, Father, because we're all united, all Chassidim across the world are unified. And perhaps a little different pirush in these words. Let this be the last blessing the Eibishter gives the Jewish people during the time of Golus. We ask the Eibishter, Borcheinu benchos, Avinu, by giving us our Father. Why? Kulanu, we're all standing ke'echad. We all feel our yechidah shebenefesh that is not satisfied just with this bracha, getting brachas from the Rebbes, getting nice. The Rebbe takes care of us. But we will nicht ein Ganeden, like the Alter Rebbe said. We will nicht ein Olam Haba. We will dir allein. We want our Rebbe alone. May we merit to see that now.
Okay, two brief announcements. Firstly, tonight's event is sponsored Le'ilui Nishmas Miriam Bas Alter Mordechai. When the Neshama should have an aliyah and only brachas and simchas for the family. Also, there is a pan kloli that is circulating. You can sign it. It's going to be sent to the oil in honor of Yud Shevat. In it asks for a bracha on behalf of all who signed it, and Kahal Das Chassidim and Klal Yisrael, that we should be benched with gezunt and with naches and with hatzlocha and with shiduchim and with parnosa barachova and brios halachoina and all the things that we daven for. We should be reunited with our Rebbe, with Mashiach Tzidkenu, taken from Yad Mamash. Without further ado, one of America's premier Jewish scholars in Torah and Jewish mysticism, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Y.Y. Jacobson, is one of the most sought-after speakers of the Jewish world today, lecturing to Jewish and non-Jewish audiences on 6 continents and in 40 states, and serving as teacher and mentor to thousands across the globe. He is considered to be one of the most successful, passionate, and mesmerizing communicators of Judaism today, culling his ideas from the entire spectrum of Jewish thought and making them relevant to contemporary audiences. Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson was the first rabbi ever to be invited by the Pentagon to deliver the religious keynote to the U.S. military chief of chaplains and to the National Security Agency. At the conference, he was hailed the Jewish Billy Graham. I'm taking it from your website, Hatishkin Kindness. Where do you think I get all my speeches from? Rabbi Jacobson founded and serves as dean of the yeshiva.net, teaching via the web one of the largest Torah classes in the world today, with thousands of students globally. Formerly, he served as editor-in-chief of the largest Yiddish English newspaper existing today, the Allgemeiner Journal, and a spiritual leader of Congregation Beis Shmuel in New York. Rabbi Jacobson is the author of A Tale of Two Souls, a 150 audio series in the teachings of Hasidic classics, the Tanya, and has written more than 1,000 articles on diverse themes in Jewish thought. You can read the rest of his bio on his website. It's fascinating. TheYeshiva.net. Moirai v'Rabboisai, with Derech Eretz and with Hadras Kavod. Without further ado, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Jacobson.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Kesselman. Rishus all the Rabbonim, Gaonim, Rosh Yeshivas, Mashpia, Mechanchim, rabbis, Rebbitzins, friends, brothers and sisters, the entire community, ladies and gentlemen, Ruchim Abayim, and thank you for the invitation, thank you for the privilege, thank you, Rabbi Reichik, for extending the invitation. It's amazing how you put this together within a few days, and I'm really thrilled to be here. Now, I thought when I was flying to Los Angeles today that my topic is Yud Shevat Tovshin Pei. But as I landed and I heard the news about Kobe Bryant, I come to offer condolences, not so funny by the way, from the entire East Coast Jewish community to all my brethren, because I see that in California today there is no other topic being spoken about besides the tragedy, the helicopter tragedy which claimed the life of Kobe Bryant, his 13-year-old daughter, and the other 7 victims. And he was obviously a basketball star of the West Coast of California. And like everything, the Baal Shem Tov says, everything you hear and you see is a lesson. And perhaps a lesson from this person is, number one, you have to learn how to be a player and not a spectator. To be involved and not just a fan. And number two, another great quality of Kobe Bryant, he was a unifier, a grand unifier. I have an older brother, some of you know him, Rabbi Jacobson, and he shared with me once that on Simchas Torah, every year on Simchas Torah, those of you who remember the geography of 770 Eastern Parkway on Simchas Torah know there was a phenomenon called the Ches. The Ches was tables that were set up in the shape of a Ches. Of course, a Ches has an opening on the bottom, that's where the bima was, and people would go around the bima with the Sifrei Torah. When the Rebbe would have his Akafa, Aleph, and 7, Akafa 1, Akafa 2, he would obviously also go around the bima, and then dance in middle with the 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, in my days, 10,000 people who were suspended from air conditions, ceilings, pillars, beams. It was one of those situations that if you would drop a pin, it literally would not fall to the ground, and people actually did it. If you needed a place, you somehow climbed up to a roof, you jumped down, and you remained suspended, sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes for half an hour, until somebody in their great grace decided to let you land. The heat was rising, the vapor was rising, and my brother told me as a child, he sat over there by the tables, just a few feet away from the Rebbe dancing, on the floor with dozens and dozens or hundreds of other children. When he became bar mitzvah, and you know you become a mitzvah and you put on that funny black hat that usually goes down till your ears and your nose, and he put on that hat, and you're 13, you're an adult, you're mature, you don't want to sit with the little children and fight with them on the ground. So he went with some of my Lipsker uncles that had a place on the bleachers on the east side of 770, on the east coast. The Ches was on the west coast. That's where the action is, on the west coast. But on the east coast, there were bleachers on the wall. And he stood on one of those bleachers as a 13-year-old, to survey the situation from the bleachers. The Rebbe started to dance the Hakafas in the middle, and those who remember know that during the Hakafas, the Rebbe would make eye contact with every single individual in the room, in the shul, even if it was 8,000 people, even for a second, he would make eye contact with every single person. You often saw that he was searching for somebody, he looked, and then he was satisfied. It was a phenomenon to behold. Besides, of course, the simcha of the Torah, you saw what a Yid who's one with Torah dances like, taught you what Torah is, what Yiddishkeit is. In the middle of the dancing, the Rebbe sees my father, my late father, Zechron Levrach. And he turns to him and he says, Wo is the Zun? Where is your son? Farbrengen da jede Jahr Simchas Torah. He always Farbrengens with us here on the floor. He points to Simchas Torah. He's not here. So my father said, is da. He gegangen zu seiner Vetters of the bleachers. He went to his uncles on the bleachers, and my father knew where he was. He pointed to the bleachers to show the Rebbe that my 13-year-old brother, didn't skip the event. He was there. So the Rebbe looked up, he turns to my father and says, schon euch geworden a spectator. He has also, alas, become another spectator. Es euch geworden noch a spectator. In Yiddish, a spectator. There are two types of people. There are players and there are spectators. Spectators enjoy the game. Spectators are part of the game. They even pay a lot of money to get a good seat. But they don't have their skin in the game. It's somebody else's game. I think we all suffer sometimes from that challenge. It's the Baal Shem Tov's game. It's the Alter Rebbe's game. It's the Rebbe's game. It's Rabbi Akiva's game. It's Rashi's game. It's the Rambam's game. We're the spectators. We stand on the bleachers and go, yeah, 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 Kobe, go, Kobe, yeah. With a different name, Lahavdil. But then, we really missed the boat. Because Va'atem teluktu le'echad echad means Chayav Adam Loimar b'shvili nivra ha'olam. The Mishnah says in Sanhedrin 37, everyone is obligated to say, for me the world was created. Now if you don't understand that Mishnah, it seems like a symptom of narcissistic personality disorder. Go into your therapist and tell them I decided the world was created for me. I know people who tell this to their wives pretty often. They even open up a Mishnah, they say, I don't say it, the Rabbi said it. The only problem with that is, you should answer him is, the Rabbi say it about you too. So it works both ways. But really it's the furthest thing from arrogance. It represents the exact opposite. That there's something at stake in every single person's life. That there's something about you and about me, that if I and you don't fulfill our mission, the whole world is incomplete. The whole world is incomplete. In other words, Chayav Adam Loimar, for me the world was created because there's something at stake in my existence, in your existence, that nobody before and nobody after, even the greatest of the great, even the Rebbe b'chvoidei b'yatzmai, all the Rebbes, all the Gedolei Yisrael of all the generations, can't complete. So you have to ask yourself a question. Am I the spectator or am I a player? Am I a unifier or am I a divider? And in today's day and age, there's only two options. Either you're part of the problem or you're part of the solution. Jews love kvetching. It's what we do for a living. If you find somebody who's not kvetching, it's a shaila of the Yiddishkeit. Jew kvetches. How you doing? I think I'm having a stroke. How you doing? I almost died yesterday. I think I'm dying tomorrow. I'm in the middle of a heart attack. I have backache. I don't know what happened. I'm trying to eat. I can't eat. I'm gaining weight. I don't know why. Etc. We sigh. There comes a time in life you have to decide. Am I going to sigh about problems or am I going to be part of the solution? There's only one of two options. Rebbe used to quote his father, life is a cliff. Some people like to say a ski slope. Either I'm going up or I'm going down. Either I'm part of the problem or I'm part of the solution. Either I'm a spectator, I sit back, drink Coca-Cola, eat popcorn, French fries with ketchup, and if I don't like how the game is going, I go home early. Or I'm a player. There's only one of two options. Either I'm a unifier, I'm an ambassador of unity, I'm an ambassador of love, and I'm an ambassador of bittul, or I become an ambassador of kvetching and sighing and complaining and division and fragmentation within myself. So these are qualities that you could learn from the celebrity who fills every newscast, and not only the news at the head of the hour, the top of the hour, but literally every moment, at least since I landed in this wonderful city of Los Angeles. There's an old anecdote, it's one of my favorites, about a fellow who came from the Atlantic, the other side of the Atlantic, to America. He was born in Pinsk. Pinsk is a city in Lithuania, Belarus. Depends who won the war that Wednesday. He came from Pinsk to America. Now in Pinsk, he was known as a shlomazel. You know what a shlomazel is? If you don't, you'll Google it, you'll figure it out. He was a shlomazel. He came to America. He decided he wants to open a new chapter in his life. How do you open a new chapter in your life? He borrowed money. He bought himself a beautiful suit, extraordinary tie, nice hat, exquisite shoes. He decided he's going to present himself as a feinschmecker, as an aristocrat. He goes to shul, Shabbos. He's not going to sit in the back. He's going to sit in the front, right near the president and the gabbai and the philanthropists, right there at the front. You carry yourself with dignity, people respect you. But then he thought to himself, it's not enough. And then he had a great idea. You know, the Gabbai always looks for a kohen. A kohen, a kohen, a kohen. He'll say he's a kohen. The moment you say you're a kohen, you're getting an aliyah every Monday, every Thursday, every Shabbos, benching, birchas, kohen. You're always being honored. Vikid Ashtai. It's a wonderful way to garner respect from the community. Sure enough, before the reading of the Torah, the Rabbi says, kohen, kohen, yeah, I'm a kohen. This Jew from Prince gets an aliyah, shkoyach, 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 shkoyach. He never got so many shkoyachs in his entire life in Pinsk. Sits down in the front. The plan worked. He's feeling very good about himself. After davening, custom is you go by the rabbi to say good Shabbos, shake a hand. Goes by the Rav. The Rav takes a look. Says, Shmela? From Pinsk? Says, yeah, Shmela from Pinsk. Wow, you made it. You're alive. You're here in America. Yeah, I'm here. The rabbi says, but I have one question. I remember you from Pinsk. I remember you as a child. I remember your father, Olav Shalom. I remember your Zayda, Chaim Yankel, Olav Shalom. When I was a kid, I still remember your Elta Zayda, Zundel. They were good Jews, feine Yidden, ehrliche Yidden, but they weren't Koyanim. What's the people saying about not Koyan? How do you become a Koyan suddenly? I have to tell you the answer in Yiddish, my friends. Some things you have to say in Yiddish. I'll translate. He says, Rebbe, Herzlichkein, da is Amerika. Als kennt sein Rav, kann ich sein Koyan. This is America, my dear Rabbi. If you can be a Rav, I can be a Koyan. It works. Chashina l'goyim. It's an anecdote, but there's a profound message. It reminds me, they said, there was once a fellow. He was also a poverty-stricken individual. He used to buy the lottery ticket every week. It was a lottery ticket that went for $365 million. His wife, Sprinze, calls up the rabbi one day, says, Rebbe, sakonas nefashos, my husband's life is in danger. He says, what happened? What happened, Sprinze? He won the lottery. 365 million. She says, well, it's wonderful news. Halavayaf alle Yidden gesagt geworden. It's wonderful. He says, no, I know my husband. He has a weak heart. He's not going to be able to deal with such news. The moment he hears that he won the lottery ticket, he's going to faint. He can have a heart attack, chas v'shalom. He can expire. He can, who knows what. I'm frightened. I'm frightened for his life. So the rabbi says, you know what? Send him into my office. On the way home, I'll prepare him for the news. I have a way psychologically to prepare people for the news who'll be able to deal with it, be able to handle it. Great. Rebbe, you're the best. Tells her husband, go to the rabbi, wants to see you after work. He goes into the Rebbe, the Rav. Shalom aleichem, aleichem shalom, how you doing? Rabbi, what gives me the honor? Rabbi said, I just wanted to have a little schmooze with you. How are you doing in Parnassa? How is your livelihood doing? He says, Rebbe, you know, I have never had a penny. I never make ends meet. I've been struggling for my entire life. My father struggled, my Zayda struggled, my Elta Zayda struggled, all back to Adam Arisha Barei Tzadas. We were not destined to have mazel. What should I tell you? Every Rosh Hashanah I daven, but I know it's age-changing. Rabbi says, come on, a little emunah, a little bitochen. God runs the world. Liya kesef. If he wants to give you a couple of dollars, he'll give you. Maybe you should make it p'sakeli. Maybe you should do the p'sayishtadlus. He says, yeah, I buy the lottery ticket already 45 years. He says, no. He says, you think I win? People like me don't win. People in Montana win. People in Kentucky. People in Wyoming win. People like me, he says, why do you buy the lottery? You buy, it's a Jewish thing, you have to buy a lottery ticket. But it's not to win, it's just to complain and lose again. He says, this lottery ticket you bought? Yeah, 365 million, I shouldn't buy it. He says, no, maybe you got the right numbers. Maybe the 6 numbers are your numbers. He says, let's not go into hallucinations, chaloimus, please, let's be realistic. He says, what? Some Chevreman, Richard Smith VI in Kentucky could choose the right numbers, Chaim Yankel can't. Maybe you did. He says, why would you want to build up my hopes of something that never happened and never will happen? How can you be sure it never happened? And what if you did win? He says, Rebbe, here's the deal. If I won, you get half. The rabbi fainted, collapsed, had a heart attack, expired. You see, friends, it's not so easy. It's not so easy to deal with good news. Sometimes people become experts in dealing with challenging news. They don't know how to deal with good news. It's hard for people. Yeah. They say an old story, Israel was struggling with its economy years ago. So the Knesset had an emergency meeting. What do we do to build up Israel's economy? Today, Baruch Hashem, it's better. Pretty good, actually. So an old man stands up. He says, I have a great idea. Let's learn from Japan and Germany. Let's declare war on the United States of America. What will America do? They'll wipe us out. And then Americans feel guilty. They'll rebuild us into an economic superpower. Look what they did with Japan. They did it with Germany. That's how we'll save our economy. One Alta Yid, one older Jew, gets up, scratching his forehead. He says, there's one problem. What happens if we win the war? This is a problem. Somebody once said, a professor of Yiddish in Harvard, Ruth Weiss, she once said, you know, when a Jew makes a fist, the next step is a shamnu, bakadnu, gazalnu. Other people make a fist, check out your nose by the doctor tomorrow. But a Jew, I make a fist, I'm sorry for living, I'm sorry for existing. It's a mentality. It's a mentality. We know where it comes from. I'm not going to psychologically analyze it at the moment. Sometimes you have to know how to get the good news. And I share with you an incredible teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. Why am I sharing this teaching of the Baal Shem Tov? Everybody knows that when the Rebbe Rayatz, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, whose name I'm privileged to carry as Yitzchak, passed away Shabbos morning, Parshas Boy, the 10th of Shvat, Tovshin Yud, 1950. One day before, he published an essay, a discourse, a maimer. One day before. He published literally one day before his passing, he published a special Torah, a whole full discourse, which began with the famous verse of Shir Hashirim, Bossi Legani, Achoisi Kala. Hashem says, I've come back to my garden to be with my sister, with my Kala, with my bride, with my beloved bride. Bossi Legani. And the headline of the discourse is, Shabbos Parshas Boy, Yud Shevat, Tovshin Yud. Because it was the Yartzeit of his grandmother. It is the Yartzeit of his grandmother, Rebbe Rivka, the wife of the Rebbe of Shmuel, the fourth Chabad Rebbe. So he published a maimer for his Baba's Yartzeit. Of course, nobody expected that that very day his soul would return to its maker. So some of you know that the Rebbe had a fascinating custom that every year on the Yartzeit of his father-in-law, Yud Shevat, the Rebbe Rayatz, he would say a discourse that began with this verse, Bossi Legani. Now the discourse has 20 chapters. So every year, the Rebbe on Yud Shevat would focus his own discourse on another chapter. And after 20 years, he finished the whole maimer. So he started again. That was 1971. He started 1951, the first Yartzeit. He finished 1970, the 20th chapter. 71, Tovshin Lamed Aleph, he did the second cycle. That stopped in 1988 when he explained chapter 18. The following few Yud Shvats, until his passing, he didn't discuss the maimer. So the Rebbe did almost 2 full cycles. According to this cycle, this year, Tovshin Pei, Tovshin Ayin, 2010, the cycle began again. Because 1990, the second cycle ended. 1970, the first cycle ended. 1990, the second cycle ended. 2010, a new cycle began. And 2020, this year, Yud Shevat, we learned the 10th chapter of Bossi Legani. So I went back to study the maimer the Rebbe said on the 10th chapter of Bossi Legani, which was Tovshin Chaf, 1960. This is Tovshin Pei. This was Tovshin Chaf. It's an incredible discourse. Very, very emotional, very moving. In the middle, the Rebbe broke down, choked up in tears. I'll soon tell you at which piece. But the whole Maimer is very profound on two levels. What we call in Chabad jargon, haskola and avoida, meaning both in terms of the profound ideas in Yiddishkeit and in the profound emotional relevance of these ideas. Here tonight, I feel that it behooves us to share at least two fundamental ideas from that Bossi Lagani Tovshin Chof, Bossi Lagani 1960, and its relevance to our lives today, many decades later, as we prepare to commemorate the 70th Yartzeit of the Rebbe Rayatz and the 70th anniversary of that day, Yud Shevat, when his son-in-law, the Rebbe, assumed the Nesias, the leadership of Chabad. And he quotes the Sefer Toldos Yaakov Yosef. Toldos Yaakov Yosef is one of the earliest Hasidic works that was written by a man named Rabbi Yaakov Yosef, the Rav of Pulno. He was a student of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov didn't write his own teachings. So all the teachings that we have from the Baal Shem Tov are from his students' writing. So one of the most reliable sources for what the Baal Shem Tov taught comes from Toldos Yaakov Yosef, because he was a direct pupil and he transcribed dozens, maybe hundreds of teachings he heard from his Rebbe. So the Rebbe quoted a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, quite a daring teaching. It's a Gemara in Masechta Gittin, Daf Nun Vav Amud Aleph. Nun Hey, Nun Vav Amud Aleph, the fifth Perik of Gittin, Perik HaNezokim. The story is well known, but the interpretation of the Baal Shem Tov is extraordinary. The Gemara tells the story, you know the beginning of the story, it's known as the story of Kamsa Bar Kamsa, but what's relevant here is the end of the story. This fellow Bar Kamsa, who was thrown out of a party, went to Rome and told the emperor, Mordu b'cho Yehudoi, the Jews rebelled against you, and I'll prove it to you. Send an offering to the temple, they won't sacrifice it. They don't care for the emperor. He sent a wonderful calf, a beautiful calf, and he made a blemish, which for the Gentile world was not called a blemish, but for the Jews it was a mum. L'didhu loy have a mum, l'didon have a mum. The sages get a calf from the emperor of Rome. They take a look, it has a blemish. You can't offer it on the Beis HaMikdash. But why can't you offer it? Because there's a pasuk in Emor, Bal mum lo Yartzeit, we can't offer a blemished animal. But pikuach nefesh, Doiche kol ha'Torah kula, the Gemara says in Yuma, life and death overrides the whole Torah, including sacrificing a blemished animal. We have to sacrifice the blemished calf on the altar in the Beis HaMikdash because of Shalom Malchus. You can't enrage the Roman emperor when Rome ruled Judea with an iron fist. But there was a sage, a Tana. His name was Reb Zcharia ben Avkilas. And he said, you can't. The word will go out that we offer blemished animals. We can't make an exception. We can't do this. So they told Zechariah, there's one more option, only one more option. Second option is, we have to kill him. He's a Moser. If we don't offer the calf, he's going back to Rome. Who knows how many Jews can die because of this man? We have to get rid of him. There's no choice. Reb Zcharia protested. He said, if we kill him, the rumor will be that if somebody makes a blemish in an animal, in a carbon, matal mum bekachim, gets the death penalty. There's no such a thing. We don't kill people because they made a blemish in a holy animal. Doesn't work that way. So Rabbi Yochanan said these words: An vos nusoi shel Zcharia ben Avkilas hechriva es beisenu sorfa es hechalenu v'higla es baneinu. The humility of Chayev and Afkilas destroyed our home, burnt God's sanctuary, and exiled our children. Why does he use the word anvosnusai? Where do you see humility here? You could say the righteousness, the caution, the sensitivity, the indecisiveness, the ambiguity, the fear. Anvosnusai means the anova, the humility. We always look at anova as a wonderful thing. Humility. Ha'ish Moshe Anov. Anov is one of the qualities at the end of Saita. Humility is a great virtue. The Basilis Yesharim and so many other Svarim of Muslim, Achshav, Chassidus, Kabbalah, Gemara, Medrash, even Halacha explore the virtue of humility, Anov, the negativity of Gaiva. Anvosnusa. So the Mefarshim asks this question. The Moira Einayim has a famous long commentary. What was the humility of Chayev and Afkilas? He says that Chayev and Afkilas knew that the Beis HaMikdash is destined to be destroyed. But he didn't want to tell anybody that he knows because of his humility. So he found excuses of how to make it happen. The Moira Einayim says his mistake was he didn't realize that Jews could change every edict in the world. The Vilna Gaon has a famous explanation on Vasnusai, beautiful explanation about how the Sanhedrin used to vote. He was considered a cotton, so therefore he voted at the end. Agam Sabi, an explanation that's beyond the realms of tonight's Shir lecture. But the Baal Shem Tov gives a psychological interpretation. And the Baal Shem Tov says, and I quote the Toldos Yaakov Yosef, who quotes his teacher, which the Rebbe quotes in Bossi Lagadi Tovshin Chav 1960, Yud Shevat 1960 at the Farbrengen, the Maimer, that the Baal Shem Tov says that sometimes humility is responsible for the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, for the decimation of the sanctuary, and for the exile of the children. How? Why? Says the Baal Shem Tov, and I'm going to quote the words of the Toldos, which he heard from his Rebbe. He writes it in Lashon Kodesh, and then I'll explain it. The humility of a person often causes him to become distant from Avodas Hashem, from serving God. Because he or she is so humble, they cannot believe that he or she has the power, that through their tefillah, through their Torah, they can change the world. Who am I? I'm a loser. I'm a doormat. I'm a rag. I'm a nobody. I can't believe that my Torah could create a flow, a shefa, a flow to all the world. The angels are waiting for you. All the angels want to eat. They need nurture. They need tender love and care. They need nutrition. They need you to give them nutrition. If a person would believe this, how much would his service to Hashem be with tremendous passion, enthusiasm, joy, and awe? The Gam Lossi slave, my friend said it's even more. In Tishkevun Bein Shvasvasayim, that says in Tehillim, say Chazal, Hashem shoymer v'shoykid al svas odam l'noishko k'shoymer b'toyru tefillah. Hashem himself rests between your lips. Tishkevun Bein Shvasvasayim. God hangs out between your lips. Because every time you open your mouth, saying positive words of Torah and Tefillah, He kisses your lips, He kisses your words. Who will not be overtaken by a sense of tremendous awe and passion that God in His essence guards, watches, and remains attentive 24 hours to the mouth, to the verbal communicativity of a human being. The foundation of Judaism must be for a person to say, every one of my movements, all of my relationships, all of my encounters, all of my businesses, and all of my words change all of the worlds. They create an impression. When you start thinking, who am I? Come on. Stop calling me such a pompous guy. I'm a nobody. I can't repair anything above. I can't repair anything below. It sounds holy, but you know what the consequence is? He loses his relationship with his soul, with God. He becomes a frivolous addict. Sometimes the greatest destruction of a Beis Hamikdash, of holiness in people's lives, comes from another shaloibim koima, displaced humility. Those four words, mi ani u'ma ani, who am I and what am I? When a person, says the Baal Shem Tov, asks himself or herself the question, who am I to be powerful? Who am I to have influence? Who am I to be successful? Who am I to make a difference? Who am I to change reality? And who am I to be happy? And who am I to have a great relationship with my kids and with my grandchildren? And who am I to have an awesome marriage? And who am I to be an ambassador of love and light and hope and healing and redemption? And who am I to be gorgeous inside and outside? And who am I to be a beacon of light? This who am I often sounds righteous, holy, even religious and sacred, especially when there's a little Jewish guilt that comes in, and a little Jewish trauma, and some Jewish toxicity. It almost sounds like a holy question. And what the Baal Shem Tov is teaching us is that, for many of us, the truth is that it's not our darkness that we fear so much. It's not our toxicity that we fear so much. It's not our loneliness and our pain and trauma that we fear so much. You know what we fear even more than our pain? You know what we fear even more than our inadequacy? It's our light that we fear. It's our greatness that we fear. It's making peace with the fact that you are an ambassador of God in this world, that you are a manifestation of infinity in this world, that every movement and every word, every encounter and every experience, you are an ambassador of Ein Sof b'chvoidei u'bi'atzmoi. The Baal Shem Tov said it's not just the angels who look at you, it's God Himself, Hashem Atzmus Ein Sof, that guards your lips and cherishes your choices, when those choices bring yourself and your loved ones and your community and your home and your heart and your world closer to their own truth. People say, deep down, it's often subconscious, and I'm going to ask you to look into your heart right now and ask yourself the question, can you make peace with your infinity? Can you accept that you are as healthy as it gets? You are as holy as it gets. You are as powerful as it gets. Can you once and for all say goodbye to the humility and humbleness that causes you and I to destroy our ability to generate so much holiness, beauty, love, splendor, happiness, and a consciousness of redemption in the atmosphere of our kitchens, dining rooms, living rooms, bedrooms, offices, community centers, in our streets, in our schools, and in our world. You ask, who am I? Who am I to be great? Who am I to make a difference? Who am I to be happy? Who am I to awesome husband, the most awesome father, the greatest mother, the greatest wife, the greatest human being, the greatest Jew. Who are you? What do you mean, who are you? You're a chelik elekam imal? Mamish. What type of question is this, who are you? You are a manifestation of God's light in this world. That's who you are. Don't confuse this with arrogance and pompousness and stupidity and gaiva and superficiality and haughtiness and narcissism. This type of inner dignity actually creates much more humility. Because this is not about me taking my ego seriously, and that if you have a different opinion, I have to mow you down like I mow your lawn. This is not about koichi v'yotzim yadi. It's about appreciating the fact that you are. Who are you for real? Who are you at your core? You're divine light. Shluchai shel adam k'moisoi. You're a shliach of Hashem. So you represent the one who sent you. So who are you? You're as infinite as the one who sent you. You're wholesome, you're confident, you're happy, you're great, you're beautiful, you're marvelous, you're splendid. And the Rebbe, vintage Lubavitcher Rebbe, says in the next line, and the Baal Shem Tov says that Reb Zcharia ben Avkilas' humility destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. So then, Miklal Lav Atar Shemei Hein, what builds the Beis HaMikdash? What builds holiness in the world? What brings the Shekhinah down into the world? The opposite of Avos Nosish was Zcharia ben Avkilas. Discovering your inner conviction and your inner voice of how amazing you are, because you in its essence is nothing but the oir of the Ein Sof in this world. That is who you really are. Never about ego. Shluchai shel adam k'moisoi. That's what builds Kedusha. I have to tell you, I was reading this, and I'm like, wow. The Rebbe identifies here the malady of our generation. One of the greatest maladies of our generation is people love saying Lashon Hara about themselves. They love believing that they're messed up. It's almost a mitzvah. Oh, you messed up. Haidu Lashem ki toiv, just like me. Now let's figure out who messed you up. There's always somebody to blame. You have good mothers and good fathers. And that's why, they say there's three types of Jews: neurotics, psychotics, and psychiatrists. Certainly in California, there's not too many more types. Present company excluded. I'm not talking about you guys. So somebody asked me, what's the difference? I said, look in Webster. He said, no, I want to hear your definition. I said, the neurotic builds castles in the air. The psychotic lives in those castles. The psychiatrist, he collects the rent from both of them. And the rent is very steep. Often, so many of us identify ourselves as problem cases, especially those sitting here who did endure abuse, who did endure trauma, who did endure dysfunctional families. And if you didn't grow up in a dysfunctional family, you'll never understand what other people go through. And if somebody did not abuse you physically, emotionally, spiritually, you'll never understand it. Baruch Hashem, you'll never understand it. But the Baal Shem Tov is not telling you to deny or repress or make believe it didn't happen or live in La La Land and play dumb and walk around, hey, everything is so beautiful. That had nothing to do with the Baal Shem Tov. That was not his perspective. That was not his teaching. When the Baal Shem Tov is saying this, it's coming from the deepest voice. I know that you may have challenges. I know that I may have challenges. Sometimes the challenges are very deep, but don't allow yourself to identify that toxicity as your core. You are infinity, and you can contain your challenges. You can contain your problems. Your soul is greater than any problem you might have. Your soul, which is divine, is greater than any trauma you may carry. Your soul is larger than any star. embedded in your psyche, mind, heart, body, or soul. Never for a moment allow the voice that speaks negatively of yourself, that speaks of your bad mazel, that speaks of your horrible past, that speaks of your horrible family, that speaks of your horrible dysfunctional future. Become the sole voice that dominates the conversation inside here. Never allow addiction to define you. Never allow your disappointments and frustrations and pain to define you. Never allow yourself to really see yourself in terms of this displaced Mike. Thank you. Let's see. If not, he'll come back. As this loser, as this nobody. I mentioned Simchas Torah. I'll tell you a little story. It's little, but it's profound. It was Simchas Torah once. The Rebbe was given the Sefer Torah, and he was going to the bimah to dance. He goes to the bimah to dance, and those of you remember, everybody would kiss, mwah, mwah. I remember my father told me to always tell the Rebbe, is ol der Leben iber ayar. So that's what I did all the years. You should live to do it next year. And the Rebbe would always say, Amen gam atem. In simple humility. A little child is telling him you should live to do this next year. He would say, Amen gam atem. Somebody once kissed the Sefer Torah. And he tells the Rebbe in Yiddish, the Rebbe soll misgala werden. The Rebbe should be revealed. So the Rebbe said, Amen gamata. He was a little taken aback. So the Rebbe saw it, and he said, Ihr hat euch was zu megala sein. You also have what to reveal. It seems like two separate blessings. You're telling me I should reveal myself. I'm telling you, you also have what to reveal. But friends, it's really the same thing. You want me to reveal myself, you have to reveal yourself. Because what is a Rebbe? What is a Rebbe? A Rebbe essentially is a person who helps each person articulate their own inner godliness, their own inner infinity. A Rebbe is not somebody who plays the game and everybody sits and says, hey, you're doing well. Go, 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 go. That's for fans, spectators. A Rebbe is the one who inspires within each and every person their own Rebbe. To be able to find within each and everyone to be able to discover in themselves who they really are. To go beyond the anvasnusoi, I'm small, I'm insignificant, I'm valueless, I'm a nobody just trying to make ends meet. Was bin ich? Wer bin ich? Ihr habt euch was zu megala sein. Do you know how much you have to reveal? Do you know how many potentials lay dormant? Do you know how many resources are there embedded in your soul? Are you going to allow all of the embryos inside of you to experience premature death? Are you going to allow all the possibilities, all the potentials, all the koiches that fill your heart to go unrealized, unactualized? I have to say I was moved by a little anecdote. Shimon Peres was 93 years old when he passed away. Just a few years ago before Rosh Hashanah. So his son says, Abba, what should I write on your tombstone? He says, the man who died prematurely. I liked it. I have to say, I liked it. He was a president for many years. Yeah, he had a levaya mamash as abiroivam hadras melech. 40, 50 state leaders and presidents and kings came to the cemetery. You realize your potential. Kobe Bryant, Yogi Berra. This is from the East Coast. Was once asked by his wife a couple of years ago, Yogala, where should I bury you? He says, what's the problem? She says, I have a terrible dilemma. You were born in Missouri. You live in New Jersey, but you play for New York. Where do I bury you? New York, New Jersey, or Missouri? So he says, surprise me. I saw that line, somebody sent me and said, you know what? Can I surprise myself? Can you surprise yourself? Or no more? The greatest tragedy of life is you put yourself into a box and you become predictable. There's a medrash that says that when a person, the medrash goes through how people behave like animals at different stages. Sometimes you're like a donkey, and sometimes like a dog, and sometimes like a horse. And it says when you get older, you become like a monkey. Nasike Kaif. The Kotzke Rebbe says, was etwas? A Pferd verstehe ich, a Hund verstehe ich, a Chamoy verstehe ich. Was etwas a Kaif, a monkey? He says, because monkeys imitate human beings. He says, you reach a certain age, you start imitating yourself. This is who I am, and now it's just an imitation. Every day, I imitate what I did yesterday. I imitate what I did before. This is who I am. This is my routine. This is when I wake up. This is when I go to sleep. This is how many books I take with me to my night table. How many books do you take with you to your night table before you go to sleep? Okay, you don't have to all answer. This is what I eat. This is what I don't eat. This is who I speak to. This is who I don't speak to. This shul I don't step foot into. This shul I do step foot into. For this year I have ADD, for this year I have ADHD, for this year I have PDD, for this year I'm ready to die. Which is sometimes a better option. I start imitating myself. I know who Y. Jacobson is. I could read my bio on, he said, Rabbi Kessler told me how I could find out about myself. Yeah, a guy was once in the Bahamas on vacation. So he writes a postcard to his therapist. He says, I'm here in the Bahamas, I'm having a great time. I wish you were here to tell me why. What's the nakuda of every mind chassidus? Surprise yourself! You're Yartzeit, you're infinite. Don't be so predictable. Shock yourself. Shock me. Shock your spouse. Try tonight. Yeah! The problem is she's used to that.
Battery died. You have another battery?
Let some of the other guys do that. Yeah! What kind of batteries?
Special battery.
Reb Nachman of Breslov once said, what's the difference between giving a speech and singing a song? He said, when you give a speech and somebody else starts talking, it's called interruption, which is the minhag by Yidden, to interrupt, especially Anshe Shleimayni, v'chuli v'chuli. What happens when you sing a song and somebody starts singing? It's called harmony. So he said the purpose of life is to stop talking and to start singing. Because people who talk, the whole world is interrupting them. Always. People who sing, the whole world is harmonizing with them. I would just add that there are people that even when they sing, they're speaking. And there are people, even when they speak, they're singing. But you can actually try it out. When you come home at night, never speak. Only sing. Okay? So you come home, and your wife says, you were supposed to be home 3 hours ago. You don't answer with speaking, only singing. Good evening, how are you? I'm so sorry that I am late. Now what is she going to say? I could never trust you. I should have listened to my mother. Yes, you probably should. I'm a chaya, it's all over. In life, you have to learn how to sing, not speak. Even when you're speaking, let the world harmonize with you. How do you let the world harmonize with you? When you uproot anvasnusoy shoschayim and afkilas. When you realize who you are, you could every moment identify with your identity as a reflection of infinity in this world. So all the voices that tell me, with this person I can't make up, this person I can't say I'm sorry to because I'm going to feel bruised. Because I got into an argument with my wife yesterday, which followed an argument the day before, which followed an argument for the last 29 and a half years. Therefore, today we have to continue the argument. That's not how infinity speaks. That's how slavery speaks. That's how fear speaks. That's how insecurity speaks. That's how trauma speaks. Identify with another voice in yourself. My dearest friends, and then you'll build Beis HaMikdashes wherever you go. You'll become a Beis HaMikdash. You'll become a conduit of Elokus, of truth, of justice, of kindness, of compassion, of light. This doesn't mean we don't fall, doesn't mean we don't stumble, it doesn't mean we're not confused. It does mean that we can identify the confusion, we can identify the pain, we can identify the insecurity, and then choose to align ourselves with infinity and act from that space. And if it's not enough to live with, comes the Rebbe in the next piece of Bosti Legani Toshin Chaf and shares a teaching of the Maggid of Mizrich. And it's in the middle of this teaching that the Rebbe choked up a lot of tears and great emotion as he shared this teaching of the Maggid. And I ask you to open your hearts and ask God to allow me to be a conduit for this teaching of the great Maggid of Mizrich, communicated in that Bosi Legani 1960. Says the Maggid. It says in Parshas B'Shalach, Vayira, Vayar, Vayosh Hashem, Vayemohu, Es Yisrael Miad Mitzrayim, Vayar Yisrael, Mitzrayim Yisrael Spasayom, Vayiru Ames Hashem, Vayaminu B'Hashem Avu Moshe Avadai. They saw God, they believed in God and in Moshe. Says the Mechilta in Parshas B'Shalach. B'Mitzrayim, Nitma HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lahem, Kenar. Biyam nidma lehem kebachur. B'Sinai nidma lehem kezoke. When they left Egypt, the Rebbe Shalom appeared like a little child. That's what he looked like. At the sea, at the Yam Suf, he looked like a nar. Not an infant, but a young man. A boy, a teenager, a young adult. By Mitzrayim, a baby. By the Yam, a bocher. By Sinai, they came to Mount Sinai. Nidma lehem kezoki. Now Hashem looked like an old man. Asks the Maggid. I don't understand. At Sinai, Moshe said, Lo yisasa lechem kol pesel l'chol tmuna. No image, no statue, no picture, no figure. How does a Mechilta say this? Mechilta is Rebbe Shmuel. Or Mechilta is Mechilta de Rashbi. You're dealing with the greatest of the Tamoyim. Mechilta is one of the earliest sources of Torah Shabbal Peh that we have before Mishnah, before Gemara. Mechilta de Rebbe Shmuel. What does the Mechilta mean? The question of the Maggid. What's the answer of the Maggid? So the truth is, the answer of the Maggid is a very, very deep answer. Extremely deep. It's actually the essence of the Maimer Bosi Legani 1960. It's the nucleus of the atom. It's the nucleus of the Maimer, the way I understand it. I'm going to try to extract one point of the Maggid and present it in a way that I think will be at least somewhat understandable The way I understood it, Lefi Ani is died. And the Maggid gives an extraordinary metaphor. The metaphor is the Maggid, it's not my metaphor. And the Maggid says, parents who are healthy and functional, normal and loving, they carry in their minds an image of their children. We all know, you're sitting on a train, you're sitting on a bus, you're driving in your car, you're shopping in a store, you're sitting at your office, you're sitting right here, and suddenly you see your 2-year-old. You're hoping that he's sleeping. But of course, if you left him with you-know-who, I'm not sure, he's probably eating Cheerios. But you see, and you smile inside. And you give a little tefillah, like you just, you love, you kiss him in your own mind. This happens constantly. Because our children are engraved. The image of a son, the image of a daughter is engraved in the psyche, in the consciousness of a father and a mother constantly. Sometimes I'm not actively thinking about it, but so often, especially you go on a trip, you're sitting on the plane, and in your mind, you see each one of your children. And you see every feature of their body. You see their forehead, you see their temples, you see their ears, you see their neck, you see their torso, you see their arms, you see their legs. And the Maggid says, when your child is 1 year old, that's who you see in your mind. And when your child is 6 years old, that's who you see in your mind. And when your child is 17 years old, keeping you up at night, that's who you see in your mind all night. And you don't say, "Ooh, I see a 2-year-old. It's nice to do that." But you see the 17-year-old. And when your child is 46 years old, that's who you see in your mind. In the words of the Maggid, "Ksho kotten, hatzir hu kotten. Ksho gadol, nechkeka hatzir shel gadlus." This is exactly how it is. And if you're a father and a mother, you don't uproot this image. You don't want to. Even if you want to, you can't. It's my son. It's my daughter. Now I have to quote. Yodua ki Yisrael olu b'machshove. It says in Medrash Rabbi that a Jew ascended in God's thought. Pirush. Shein tamid nechkokim b'machshove elyoine k'mo she'aben chokim b'machshove aviv. Every Jew is always engraved in God's consciousness, like a child is engraved in Tati and Mommy's consciousness. Says the Maggid, "V'hinei geshaben miskasher b'maiso, v'toiv v'mamaisim shaloi, kachu chokuk b'machshavas aviv, k'shalahepech chas v'shalom, hachakike gam ken kach." I imagine my child the way he or she is at that age, at that state. Sometimes the child is healthy, child is gorgeous, child is beautiful, child is after a bath. You know, your 2-year-old is after a bath. He's tired. The terrorism finished for the night. The ice cream was put away. The kitchen is clean. Baruch Hashem, he's exhausted. It's only 1 o'clock in the morning. He's fresh out of the bath. You put him in the bed. Ah, a malach. Okay, tomorrow terrorism will return. But for the night, a malach. You know, after that bath, after that shower, you manage to shampoo him. Of course, you have to buy him his own iPhone for that, and his own computer, a private yacht, and a private jet, and a Tesla, etc. So now going for Afrikaans at the age of 3 and 4. It's fine. Beautiful. You go to your bedroom and that's what you see. You see that in it. But sometimes, not all the fathers know it, a kind macht on a bissel. A child, you know, he defecates. And sometimes a child is chalila, unhealthy. And sometimes a child is hooked up with wires. Sometimes a child is hospitalized. Sometimes a child is having a difficulty, an impediment, a disability of the mind, a disability of the body. A father and mother don't start imagining a different child, the child they would like. No. You imagine this child. Says the Maggid, a Jew is always engraved in Hashem's mind. And the Rebbe teaches, why does he use the word engraved? If he would have used the word written, I write with ink on parchment. The ink is added to the parchment. It's not the parchment. But when you say something is engraved, when you engrave words in a stone, it's the stone itself. You say a Jew is engraved in Hashem, engraved means it's Hashem's essence, it's in Hashem's essence. What type of Jew is engraved? If the Jew is small, small. If he's big, big. If he's clean, clean. If he's dirty, dirty. If he's healthy, healthy. And if he's chalila, unhealthy, unhealthy. Sometimes there's a Jew who's spiritually and morally beautiful. And sometimes there's a Jew who's struggling. He's struggling with bad habits. He's struggling with promiscuity. He's struggling with immorality. She's struggling with her own trauma or toxicity. I'm struggling because of my failures, my mistakes, my sins, my transgressions. Says the Maggid. But the Rebbeinu Shalom's mind is filled with this Jew. So what happens? If my image, the way I am, is engraved in Hashem, that becomes what Hashem looks like. God becomes a mirror of his child. And that's why the Pasuk says in Yeshaya, Perek Daled, Imrochatz Hashem es tzoyas b'nois tziyah. Sometimes Hashem washes, he cleanses, he bathes his daughter from the tzoyah, from the dirt, from the excrement. Taiches the Maggid, and this is where the Rebbe choked up. The whole world teaches Hashem bathes the child. Kevayachal Hashem Yisbarach Rayatz es atzmai mitzayas b'nois tzion lefishayich hakukim b'machshavta kevayachal. Hashem has to bathe himself. He has to clean himself from the tzayah of his child, because the excrement of his child, I'm quoting the Maggid, becomes Hashem. Because my baby is engraved in me with everything that he has, with everything that she is, including the tzayah, the filth. So Hashem has to bathe and clean himself. Rayatz es atzmai, from tzayah's b'nois tziyah. Because it becomes him. It becomes engraved, because he never ever separates. He never ever detaches. I never say, my kid made in the Pampers, now I'm sending him for adoption for a week. When they clean him up, I take him back into my house and my mind. That's the greatest tragedy. You never ever sever the connection with a child. So who does Hashem have to bathe? He could do something simple. He could say, you're not my child. Get out of my head. I'm not getting dirty with you. He can't do that. This is who I am. I am my child. My child is me. My child is clean. I'm clean. My child is filthy. I now have to wash myself. And I'm proud of it. Because the alternative is much more painful. The alternative is I amputate my essence. And you never forgive yourself. You never forgive yourself for this. What an extraordinary teaching in parenting, in education. Those of us who are parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, friends, teachers, pedagogues, mentors, mechanchim, mashpiyim, rosh yeshivas. What a lesson. I was a little while ago in a community, a large community in America, a beautiful community for Shal Shabbos. And I spoke about this theme. And I said, look, the child is causing the father and mother a lot of pain. The father and mother could say emotionally, you're not my child. I can't look at you. Your child comes home, you go upstairs. You don't want to face the pain. It's too painful. So you detach. God does not do that. Rayatz Hashem Soyas B'nai Tzion. His own Soya of B'nai Tzion. Because this becomes part of who I am, because the alternative is infinitely more painful than I said. There are children who cause their parents a lot of agony and a lot of pain. But separation is not an option. Cutting off a child, throwing out a child from your home, in 99% of cases, is not an option, because the alternative is hell. A father came over to me. It's a word in the dictionary. You can look it up. A father came over to me after. He was sobbing. He asked to talk with me in a corner of the room. And he said, "Why didn't you give this lecture 30 years ago?" I said, 30 years ago I was still wearing my own Pampers. Well, almost. I said, why? Heart-wrenching story. 30 years ago, he had a teenage boy. The teenage boy left Yiddishkeit. Dropped out of school, left Yiddishkeit. He went to consult somebody who he thought his voice is the voice of God. And the man said, you make an ultimatum, either he does X, Y, and Z, if not, you throw him out of the house. He told me I'm a Baal Tshuva. It didn't feel right, but as a Baal Tshuva, I was taught to obey. Now here I'm going to do a parenthesis and get myself a little in trouble. One of the big mistakes that us rabbis, teachers, and mentors make is that we often don't empower Baalei Tshuva to trust their own judgment and their own feelings. You never allow your return to Judaism to cause you to lose your individual personality and just follow people blindly. Mama knows best. Papa knows best. It's good to get advice. It's good to get feedback. But when something feels wrong, make sure you scrutinize the situation very well before you follow like a blind sheep. It's a terrible thing. I see talented, creative people with great personalities. They return to the frum Jewish world, and somehow they become social conformists because they want to fit in, and their entire oomph and personality is lost. It's a terrible mistake. It should never be. Back to my discussion. He tells me I didn't feel right, but I told my son, unless you change X, Y, Z, I'm going to change the locks in the house. You can't come home anymore. He says, 30 years, I haven't spoken to my son. 30 years he hasn't come home. A few years ago, he married a non-Jew. He severed every last tie with the family. 30 years, I didn't even have a telephone conversation with my son. 30 years ago, I thought I was doing the right thing. I tell you now something. For 30 years, I did not sleep one night. For 30 years, I regret that statement I told my child. Why didn't you give this lecture 30 years ago? I'm not talking about telling your son, maybe it's time to get a job and stop eating mommy's food and become independent and all that. That's a good thing. I'm talking about throwing your child out of your life, severing the relationship. A few months ago, there was a Jew, he passed away. His name was Rebbe Rayatz. Rebbe Rayatz was a teacher for 50 years in New Jersey, Delaware, New Jersey. So he passed away in July, it's past July, in the summer. At the Shiva, one of the students shared a story. And he said he was in high school, Rebbe Rayatz was his teacher, and he completely did not believe in Judaism anymore. And he was a troublemaker. So what did he do? He decided Friday night he wants to go have fun. And he knew that Rebbe Rayatz's car was in the parking lot of the yeshiva. He broke into his office. He took his keys. 10 o'clock at night after the meal. He went into the car. And a friend of his said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to the movie theater. He said, take me along. He says, no, I'm sinning for myself. I'm not sinning for you. Take me along. If you don't take me along, I'm going to get you in trouble. He says, what are you going to do? I'll get you thrown out of yeshiva. He says, that's actually a good thing. Because I'm doing nothing here. Not a bad thing. Get me thrown out of this crazy place. It's Friday night. He takes the car. He goes to the movie theater. This other boy, I guess, delivered his promise. He goes to Reb Lubavitcher's home. And he says, Pliny Almighty, this tzaddik broke into your office on Shabbos, broke the lock, took your keys, went into your car, stole your car, and he went to the movie theater. Reb Lubavitcher said, where is this movie theater? Where is it? He said, it's 2 miles from here. What's the address? How do I get there? This boy was a shtickle baki b'shas. I mean, he was a shtickle knowledgeable in some stuff. So he told him exactly how to get there. Apparently he had experience. It was winter. It was a Friday winter night in New Jersey. It's not Los Angeles, my friends. It's called the East Coast. You could come for a visit. January. MetLife Stadium, Siyam Hashas, freezing. 90,000 people freezing. And I wasn't inside with the spare ribs and the French fries and the ketchup. I had to sit with the rabbis. We don't get food. We're jealous. We have to behave. New Jersey, January, it's cold. And it was one of those cold New York, New Jersey nights of January. Fakei Yidden gedacht. You remember when you used to live in the East Coast? Remember those days? I don't know, the good old days, but certainly the cold old days. He takes his coat. This boy says, Rebbe, where are you going? I'm going to the movie theater. He says, why? I want to go. He goes, he walks to the movie theater. 2 miles, Friday night, freezing. Comes into the movie theater, he had a big black hat, that's a yeshiva hat, with a kapota, a long black kapota. He comes into the movie theater, it wasn't exactly the expected sight, Friday night. He goes over to the woman selling the tickets. He says, listen, I'm a rabbi. I don't go to the movies on Shabbos, certainly not. I don't have any money. I don't want to watch a film. I'm not buying a ticket. But I have somebody very close to me who's in one of the theaters, and I need to speak to them. Would you allow me to go in for a few minutes? I'm not sitting down to watch a movie. I'll be out in a few minutes. She says, Rabbi, I trust you. Go ahead. So he goes. Now he has to start finding a lot of movies that weekend, Baruch Hashem. And he has to go from auditorium, from hall, movie, from one theater to another room, and it's pitch dark. And a lot of people. It's a nice Friday night weekend in New Jersey, and he's going one to one, he's searching and scrutinizing. Finally, he comes to one of the theater halls, goes in, standing in the back. He's looking and looking and looking up, and his eyes fall on the sight of that boy who seemed like his Talmud. He was actually sitting alone. He goes over. He sits down, it's the middle of a movie, you don't say a word, Masal Adaber. Nobody speaks then, they have respect. Masal Adaber, Shans HaFilim. Nobody speaks. If you eat popcorn, you do it quietly. You drink Coca-Cola, you don't slurp so loud, it's not a kiddush, it's a movie. There's Rayatz in America, you have to have your priorities straight. You have to know what you believe in, what you don't believe in. Where you're silent, where you speak to the Eis Lachshus, Eis Ladaber, Ecclesiastes told us. So silently, the Lubavitcher sits down near this boy. He sits down, doesn't say a word. You know, when somebody's sitting near you, even if they don't touch you, you suddenly feel the energy. You feel your energy. So at some point, he feels that there's somebody near him. He takes a look. The Rosh Yeshiva, his Rebbe is sitting right there with a kapota, with a big hat, sitting there. He gives us, Rebbe, what are you doing here, Reb Train? What are you doing here? I came to visit you. Said, how'd you get here? I walked. It's 2 miles. I walked 2 miles. Why'd you walk? I wanted to talk to you. What do you want to talk to me about? I wanted to tell you that in this theater, the popcorn has a big question with kashrus. That's it. So I'm going to ask you a favor. Don't eat the popcorn in this dinner. That's it. That's it, I'm asking you. The popcorn here is a problem. He gets up and he walks out. He says, where are you going? I gotta go home. He walks out. He's in the street. He starts walking home. A minute later, he turns around. The boy is near him. I'm coming home with you. He says, we walk home 2 miles. Not a word about the car. Not a word about Shabbos. Not a word about the keys. Not a word about driving. Not a word about the movie theater. He's singing. 2 miles. He's singing Nigunim, Zmiris. He was a joke. He's a funny guy. He's telling jokes, telling stories, schmoozing. I had the fun of my life. We had a blast. 2 miles just joking around, singing. It was already close to the middle of the night. It was a long walk. It was cold. He said, but I wasn't cold. I felt my teacher's warmth. He says, we came home. We came back. We came back to the yeshiva. He says, never ever did I eat again non-kosher popcorn. Never ever did I steal a car again. Never did I break into his office again. And never did I violate Shabbos again. Rochatz Hashem es tzoyas b'nois tziyoi. God never detaches from a Jew, ever. I look at myself, I'm dirty, and I'm taka filthy. God says, you know what? As long as you're dirty, I'm dirty with you. I have no choice. This is the Magid. Now listen to the Rebbe's audition. Says the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Now you'll understand what the Pasuk says in Shmuel Beis. Lo yidach b'menu nidach. Nobody will be lost forever. Now you understand what the Gemara says in Masechtas Yuma Daf Pei Vav Amud Beis. That ultimately, Steinois Nasa like Zachir. All sins become mitzvahs. How? Why? How? So this is what he explained. How can you say it? How can your shlokish say Steinois Nasa like Zachir? The answer is, and I have to say this is quite daring and revolutionary, but it's one of the fundamental teachings of Chassidus, of the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid and their students throughout the generations, that the Rebbe was articulating here. If a Jew is one with Hashem's essence, so a Jew is engraved in Hashem's consciousness, so whatever I am and whatever I look like becomes divine. And God mirrors me. You know why He mirrors me? Because He mirrors me back to myself. Because my image becomes His image. He assumes who I am. Says the Rebbe, if that's the case, it means that whatever I am is eternal. Because if it's engraved in God's essence, it's not going anywhere. God is not mortal. What if I'm dirty? It means that my dirt is eternal. It somehow got engraved in Hashem's essence. But one more thing. Hashem's essence is good. So it means my dirt is eternal. But my dirt also must become good. Because it's in God's essence. So at some point, what I see as dirt, what I see as my mistakes, as my sins, as my failure, as my loneliness, as my pain, as my trauma, will be transformed and metamorphosized into divinity, into the stuff of the divine. And it also means something else. It means, like the Barditchever says from the Baal Shem Tov, Hashem Tzilcha, God is your shadow. What is a shadow? A shadow follows you. We create our reality. We create the divine reality. Kivayachol. By Mitzrayim, Hashem looked like a child, a baby. At the Yam Suf, a teenager. At Har Sinai, an elderly statesman. I thought God has no image. Says the Maggid, when the Jews left Egypt, they were infants. They were infants. The Yecheskel says, Yitzias was on his birth. You saw an infant came out of the womb of its mother, a little baby. That's the image in Hashem's essence. So what does Hashem look like? A baby, an infant. Because God is a reflection of me, because I'm one with Him. At the Yam Suf, They were more mature. He was a nar. At Har Sinai, Matan Torah, the Jews reached a state of Zokim Zesha Kama Chachma. God now reflects that image back to them. I create Kivayachol, the godliness around me. I create not only my relationship with Hashem, Hashem responds to my energy, to my attitude, to my perspectives, to my experience. It's mamish like a mirror. It's a shadow. What you show in the mirror, you will see. I can stand in front of the mirror and say I'm a dirty infant. That's exactly what I'll see. I can stand in front of the mirror and realize that exactly what I am, God is experiencing. And the moment you realize that, that's the beginning of all healing. That's the beginning of all redemption. That's the meaning of that famous expression, Dire betachtoin. He lives in the lowliest element of reality with his entire essence. In your heart, in your reality, because there's never a concept of detachment. Rochatz Hashem es tzoyas benois tzion. So, my dearest friends, this is the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov. This is the Torah of the Maggid. What does this mean for you and me? Tonight, a few days, just a little more than a week before Yud Shevat, Tovshin Pei, Yud Shevat 70 years. I think one thing it means is you could make a nice decision. You could do a good thing. You should do good things. You should do a lot of good things. We should all do a lot of good things. But I think behind all that, one must be able to start defining themselves in a new way. One must discover inside themselves the extraordinary power, potential, ability, resources that I have. Do not allow the voices that play in your mind 24 hours a day, depriving you of the one greatest truth about your life, and that is that you are always, even when you are in the thicket of failure, and even when you have just made big mistakes, that you are always aligned with infinity, that you are always embedded in God's essence, that God's essence is embedded in you, that your true essence is nothing but the divine light in this world. And therefore, at every moment, I have to make a choice. Am I now living from a place of alignment with infinity, or am I living in a place, in a cocoon, defined by narrowness, pettiness, fears, insecurities, toxicities, and that's where I am living from. Am I contributing to Churban with my Anova, or am I contributing to Binyan? Number 2, it's your image that defines much of reality. You know the old saying, whether you believe you can, or whether you believe you can't, you're probably right. Life is often a self-fulfilling prophecy. I believe I can't. I can't. That's the image I show. That's the image God experiences in himself. That becomes my God. That becomes my reality. That becomes my Eibishter. I can't. I'm paralyzed. I'm stuck. I'm miserable. L'olam vod. Or your life could be a different type of prophecy. Of course I can. God can't. I just work for God. And
And God says, okay, now we're on the same page. And the Maggid says, but even if you say you can't, God ultimately will transform that too, but what do you have to wait? Number 3, when I can cultivate this, my attitude with people is different. You come home to your spouse, you come home to your children, come home to your husband, to your wife. You come to work, you go to shul, you meet people here, there, conversations, emails, text, WhatsApps, encounters on every level. You become an ambassador. An ambassador of what? Of love, of light, of hope, of healing, of redemption. Number 4, never detach from your loved ones because it's painful. Never detach from yourself because it's painful. Rayatz Hashem es soyas b'nei Sion. Never ever detach from any of these people, including yourself. You don't have to detach. You can hold on to it. You want to hold on to it. Hold on to it with tenderness, with love, and with care. And then there is hope that all the excrement will be wiped away, will be cleansed. Just as Hashem does it, He holds on to it. And He cleanses it. We must do the same. Hold on to your loved ones. Hold on tight. And if it's difficult, it only means you have to hold on tighter, not looser. If it's difficult, you hold on tighter. So, some of you remember this Jew, also lived in New Jersey. His name was Herbert Weiner. Herbert Weiner was a Reform rabbi. He had a very big Reform congregation in New Jersey. In the 1950s, he started to research Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah. He went to meet many mystics, contemporary mystics. One of them lived in Brooklyn, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. His encounters with these mystics from all segments of Jewry, he recorded in a magnificent book entitled 9 and a Half Mystics. Of course, there were 9, and then there's the half a mystic, who is he himself. Herbert Weiner in 1955 came knocking at the doors of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, spent hours with the Rebbe and recorded much of the conversation in the book 9 and a Half Mystics. Fabulous book, fabulous conversations, extraordinarily enlightening on both sides. He started to come to the Rebbe's Farbrengens. Yud Kislev 1957, he came to the Farbrengen of the Rebbe in honor of Yud Kislev. And at that Farbrengen, the Rebbe told a story, a remarkable story. What was the story? When the Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya, was in prison, a Christian minister from the government, from the Tsarist government, came into his cell and asked him questions on the Hebrew Bible, because this was part of their investigations of the Baal HaTanya of the Alter Rebbe. And he asked a famous question. After Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, God tells Adam, Ayeka, where are you? Did Hashem not know where Adam is? Ayeka, where are you? So the Alter Rebbe said, Rashi asks the question. He tells the Rebbe in Russian, I know what Rashi says. I want to hear what you have to say. So the Rebbe says to him, the Alter Rebbe says, do you believe that the Torah is timeless and eternal? He says, yes. So the Alter Rebbe says, if so, I'll explain it to you. The question of God to Adam and Eve is a question that God continuously asks every human being, not geographically, but existentially. Ayeka, where are you? You are alive for so many and so many years. And the Alter Rebbe said the number of years that this minister was then at his age. I think it was like 54, if I'm not mistaken. Somewhere there. You're alive 54 years. So God asks you every day, where are you? Have you fulfilled your mission in this world? Are you fulfilling your mission in this world? I have given you time, energy, resources, vitality, wisdom, a soul, a consciousness. What are you doing with your life? Are you making the difference you have to make? That's the question. The man was blown away by the answer and he left the cell. Says the Rebbe that he heard from his father-in-law, who heard from his father, who heard from his father, who heard from his father, who heard from the Alter Rebbe himself. That this exchange saved his life. Why? He says, I was sitting in the cell, and suddenly I experienced extraordinary pleasure from one fact. Some of you may not understand what I'm going to say now, but maybe one day you'll understand. It's fine if you don't understand. I was sitting in the cell and I experienced a moment of infinite ecstasy from one fact. That I had a schus, I had the privilege to sacrifice my entire life for the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. Because the only reason the Alter Rebbe was thrown into prison was because of those who opposed the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, articulated brilliantly and systematically through Rabbi Shnei Zalman of Liadi. That I had the privilege to sit in prison and suffer for the Baal Shem Tov and his teachings. I never felt so connected to the truth. And Alter Rebbe says, you know what happens when you feel a pleasure that is infinite? Your body can't contain it. It's like electricity. The voltage is too intense for the wire. And I felt like I'm about to melt away in God's bosom. Like the Rechaim describes Nadav and Avihu's death from kissing God in Parshas Acharei Moshe. And then this minister walked in. And he asks me this question about Hayekah. And I told him that Hashem asks every Jew, where are you? Have you fulfilled your mission? And then I said to myself, and Hashem is asking me, also Hayekah, where are you? Are you fulfilling your mission? Who asked you to die? Who asked you to come up to heaven? Who asked you to melt away in ecstasy? You have to build the world. You have to bring Mashiach in the world. And you know what happened? I calmed down. I came back. His question, Hayekah, saved my life. This the Rebbe said publicly, Yud Kislev Tavshin Yud Ches, and explained the story at length with a lesson. Who was at the Farbrengen? Herbert Weiner, a Reform rabbi. After Yud Kislev, he sat down and he penned a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And you know what he wrote in the letter? He said, I listened to your sermon, to your presentation. Forgive me, I have a question. Do you, Rabbi Schneerson, do you ask yourself the question, Hayekah? And if yes, I would love to know how you answer it. Are you fulfilling your mission? Are you fulfilling your purpose? Are you doing what God wants from you? Forgive my audacity, my chutzpah, but I'm very intrigued. Do you ask the question? And how do you answer it? The Rebbe wrote him back a long letter about different issues he raised in his letter. At the end, the Rebbe addressed his question with Hayekah. I saw the letter, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, so I don't remember it verbatim. But the theme I remember very well because it became engraved in me. I'm not telling you verbatim the answer, but I'm telling you the theme of the answer. You asked me if I ask myself Hayekah. The answer is every day. I told you you'll come back. Every day I ask myself Hayekah. Every day. Now you want to know how I answer the question. And I'll tell you how I answer the question. To be able to answer Hayekah, you have to identify who you are, what your role is, what your mission is. You have to also identify, first and foremost, what God wants from you. You have to ask yourself what Hashem wants from you in this world. When you realize as some people do, that what God wants from them primarily is to transcend their own needs and to become leaders, to help, uplift, invigorate, and inspire and teach others. Then, your essential question of Ayeka is concerning your primary mission in life. Ayeka always has to address your primary mission in life. What is happening with that mission? And when you're a leader, the question must address, first and foremost, your facet of leadership. Are you doing your job as a leader? Are you successful as a leader? Are you indeed inspiring and uplifting the world you were sent to uplift? Yes or no? That's your first question of Ayeka. What is happening with your primary shlichus mission, which is leadership? The Rebbe said, and therefore, because that is my primary question that I ask myself, Ayeka, I have to be very blunt with you and tell you, I cannot answer the question. The only one who can answer my question of Ayeka is you. You're the only one who could tell me where I am. If I would be a private individual, I would be responsible only to me. But as Providence has put me where he put me, my real question of Ayeka could only be answered by you, Mr. Weiner, and I await your response. It was the last Sukkot that the Rebbe ever spoke in public. Sukkot 91. I had a schus to be one of the chayzrim, one of the oral scribes of the Rebbe in those last years. And I still remember the moment. I could see it with my eyes. I can hear it with my ears. The Rebbe is standing by the stender. I was maybe, 3 feet away. And he said words. I was a yeshiva bacher. They shocked me then. And I still remember telling a friend, this is strange. And the Rebbe said that the Tzemach Tzedek had 7 sons. 1 died in his lifetime. 1 chose not to be a Rebbe. 5 became Rebbes after he passed away. The youngest became the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe Maharaj. But when his father-in-law wrote their biography, he wrote on each one, Kvoit Kedushas, Adoineinu, Mereinu, V'Rabbeinu, including those who was not his grandfather. There were other branches of Hasidim. He wrote Kvoit Kedushas, Adoineinu, Mereinu, V'Rabbeinu. And there's a lesson he wanted to teach people. And that is, and I quote, as der Titul Admur is Shayach zu jeden Neinen. The title Rebbe can be held by everybody. And the ayah, b'shas mehert hazeh vart, chapt on atziter. When you hear such a line, you ought to start trembling. How can I say such a thing? Whoever said such a thing, the title Admur for every individual. Suddenly, Yedid, Tom, Spaghetti, and Harry's a Rebbe Megavonin. I mean, woe that day. Woe for that day. I understand. A Rebbe. Isha Leki. I mean, we know who we are. Nice Jews. Great city. And he said, you don't have to tremble. Because in the Nusach of Yartzeit and Yeboyne Shalom that we say on Yom Tov, we just did on Sukkot. What do we say? V'yiskayim bonu mikru shekasuv. V'nochal of ruach Hashem, ruach chachma gvura, ruach eitz v'das v'yiras Hashem. Everybody asks that the verses about Mashiach, Isaiah 11, should be conferred on me. V'yiskayim bonu, on me. On me should rest the Spirit of God, ruach eitz v'gvura. The Rebbe changed the subject, he moved on to the next subject. I was reviewing the talk after, and I told an older colleague, who was one of the people who would review the talks, I said, you ever heard the Rebbe should say this? The title Rebbe is applicable to everybody. The title Jew, the title Chassid, Rebbe. Whoever heard of this? I found it very, very difficult to understand. And the Rebbe himself acknowledged, he said, I know people will tremble, but that's how it is. A few years ago, I was listening to somebody talking about the Rebbe, and I didn't like what they were saying. Why? I had a flashback. You know you have a flashback sometimes? I'm standing there in 770, and I'm listening to the Rebbe saying this. And then I realized this was the last sukkah the Rebbe spoke. In many ways, it was his final will and testament. And what was he saying? He was saying, Tayere Kinderlach, dear Jews, I'm going to share something with you very powerful, life-changing, history-changing, world-changing. And that is, there's going to be a new mission now. And you know what your mission is going to be? I want each and every individual to become a Rebbe. What does this mean? Come on. I'm going to start asking everybody if I should do a surgery, if I should get married, if I should do this. What does this mean? Everybody's going to become a Neshama Datzilis, Bittul to Eitz Soif, a Rebbe. It means that now is a time when everyone is empowered not to speak about the Rebbe, not to tell stories about the Rebbe, not to tell me how great the Rebbe was and is, not to extol the virtues of the Rebbe ad infinitum, not to tell me an anecdote, a story, a miracle, a word, a teaching, a gewaldige Moses. Yes, say it, great, awesome, but you're missing the point. Something else. You know what? You know now? I want you to become a shtickle Rebbe. You become a conduit for the Rebbe. You think like the Rebbe thought. You live like the Rebbe lived. You relate to life like the Rebbe related to life. You become a living embodiment of the Rebbe's perspective, the Rebbe's soul. By the Rebbe's heart, pounded with Avos Yisrael. You be that Rebbe. When you walk into a room, what walks in? A conduit for the Rebbe. What does it mean, a conduit for the Rebbe? A conduit for a Jew who saw himself as an absolute ambassador of Hashem, as somebody whose entire reality was an expression of Hashem's oneness. You know what the power of the Rebbe was? That he had nothing, that he had no power, that he saw himself as a conduit for Hashem, nothing else. When we speak about the Rebbe, we're often speaking about the wrong person. Because if you don't understand what a Rebbe is, if you speak about the Rebbe as the Rebbe, you don't know who the Rebbe is. The Rebbe's home at Siyas is Bittul to Hashem. You know why that's so important? Because if you understand this, then everyone is a little Rebbe. Everyone is aligned with infinity. Everyone has that energy inside of them. Now you have to reveal it. I have to reveal it. Become that Admur. When people talk to you, when people hear you, when people converse with you, when you come home, who should be walking into the house? Who should be walking into the office? Who should be walking into shul? Who should be walking in the street? A piece of Avos Hashem, a piece of Avos HaTorah, a piece of Avos Yisrael. My mind, my heart, my soul, my mouth, my facilities, my resources, my koiches could and must become conduits for the infinite light of God. In other words, instead of talking about the Rebbe, I and you become that person. You live that person. This is harder work than talking about the Rebbe. It's much easier to stand up and say, I'm going to tell you now 35 miracles that happened with the Rebbe. Great. That's easy. So you're going to give another eulogy for the Rebbe on Yud Shevat? So you're going to tell me that he was such a big tzaddik, and his Avos Yisrael knew no bounds. Let me tell you a bigger miracle! A miracle of miracles that your Avos Yisrael should be able to transcend your ego and pettiness and insecurity. That my Avos Yisrael should be able to transcend my ego and pettiness and insecurity. That's a much bigger miracle. That the Rebbe's hashkafa should become mine. I should breathe it, live it, embody it in my thoughts, words, actions, soul, perspective, consciousness. Today, the word Admur must become individual. Your children look at you. Don't tell them stories about their Rebbe. Be that story. Make that story. Let that story be vivid and real in your life. Don't put it on the Rebbe. Put it inside here. How do you do that? You do it through three things. You do it, number one, through real learning. You don't learn intellectual things. You learn relevance. You learn things and you internalize them. You learn a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, you learn a teaching of the Maggid. You make it yours, I make it mine. You learn and it becomes yours, it becomes your perspective, you live it. Number two, we don't like talking about this so much. We have to work on ourselves, not on other people, on ourselves. The Rebbe once in a Farbrengen Simchas Torah, he looks at the crowd and he says, the schwerste Sache in Leben is to bewahren sein der eigene Midas. One of the hardest things in life is to change your personality, to work on your issues. He looked up at the crowd and he said, "Proof the sois that is then. Try it out, you'll see I'm right." I say to you and to me, work on one midah. You have a temper, you have an ego from here to China, your insecurity goes from here all the way down to the abyss, to South Africa. Work on it. Work on your relationships. Work on your life. Work on your heart. Work on yourself. Have the courage to surprise yourself, to reinvent yourself. Challenge yourself. People call themselves Chabad Chassidim. What does it mean to be a Chabad Chassid? In my mind, it means to be a Chabad Chassid. You wake up every morning and you say, how am I going to surprise myself today? What am I going to do not to imitate yesterday? I had a Zayd, his name was Gershon Ber Paharer. The Rebbe used to quote that every night he would go to sleep and he would say, Gershon Ber, morgen wird sein gar anders. Tomorrow I'm not going to imitate myself. And I have to be able to reinvent myself. Challenge myself. Become infinite. Don't be in a box. It's Torah. Avoid it. That's what davening is. You reinvent yourself. And the third thing is influence. Give. Teach. Share. Uplift. Empower. As you empower others, you become empowered. As you inspire others, you become inspired. As you become a giver, you're elevated to a new place. And then you and I become little admurs, conduits for the great light that the Rebbe brought into the world, continues to bring into the world. And then, only then, can we help the Rebbe answer his question. Ayeka. Only then can you and I help him answer the question. Ayeka. The Rebbe's success only means one thing. The Rebbe's leadership only means one thing. It means that something in my animal consciousness and something in my ego changed. That something new is born inside of me. That's the only thing that can answer this question of Ayeka. Thank you very much.